what are you doing?
I'm preparing like the ground.
What?
What goes on the ground?
I don't know, grass, tents, trees?
Yes, precisely. So you could say that the ground is tree-on.
Not really, no, but...
I'm preparing Alatreon. Ladies, gentlemen, and monsters of all ages, he's here. He's here, and by the old gods and the new, this monster god lives up to his lore to a ridiculous level. Like, fight-wise, purely based on fight, I would argue this is the most powerful feeling monster I have ever fought. But why is that? Is it for good reasons or for bad? And even more importantly, can you overcome this overwhelming power of his, or is it simply overpowered?
That Dr. Seuss reading was dreadful.
We'll leave it to us to answer all those questions and more. Today, I present to you our full Alatreon guide, starting by going through his base mechanics, all of his moves of note and how to best deal with them, as well as some general strategies for the hunt as a whole, capped off at the end with a quick talk about my opinions on the hunt as a whole and all of the mechanics at play. That said, mechanics at play would be an excellent name for a very particular kind of calendar company. Call me if you want to buy the rights. Starting off then with some of the more important general notes, Alatreon has 3 different modes, and which mode he is in and is going into next is entirely 100% predictable for the entire fight based on certain conditions. If you are doing the special assignment version of the quest, Alatreon will always start in fire mode. If you are doing the event quest version of Alatreon, he will either start in fire or ice mode depending on the name of the quest that you see when you post it. He will never start in dragon mode. In fire mode, he is weakest to ice element and fairly weak to water. In ice mode, he is weakest to fire and fairly weak to thunder. And lastly, in dragon mode, he is fairly weak to dragon and not too weak to a whole lot else. To put it simply, your elemental damage is meant to be done when he is not in dragon mode, really, but I'll explain why in a minute.
Well, now you've got my attention.
To explain this properly, we have to go in a sort of roundabout way. So now I'm going to start talking about Eschaton Judgment. Alatreon super move his big bombastic bad boy attack that was responsible for quite possibly millions of hearts on the first night that Alatreon was released alone. Yeah, that one. If you don't do enough elemental damage to Alatreon, this will straight up one-shot you and every hunter in your party beyond recognition. Nothing can possibly save you. You're just sort of signed up to die. If, however, you reach an elemental damage threshold, which you will know when you get a massive flinch on him and the NPCs tell you you're doing a good job, this represents a power decrease in Alatreon's Eschaton Judgment. When this happens, it is entirely survivable with nothing but a single Eschaton Jerky. Beating this mechanic is the main trick to the fight. The wrench in that, however, is that he changes elemental state throughout the fight, and his resistances change with that, meaning that sometimes your elemental weapon won't match the situation, and you won't be able to help produce the power off Eschaton Judgment for your party. Or will you?
Shh, this is the best part.
The biggest issue that people have been having with this fight as of this moment is reaching the elemental damage threshold. But I'm here to tell you right now that a good number of people out there are going about it absolutely the wrong way. You don't want a party full of mixed elements to prepare you for different phases. No, you want a party coordinated all with the same element. Why? Because you can accurately predict and control which mode Alatreon will be in for the entire fight. And if you stack the same element, you can, with proper teamwork or just good play if you're a solo hunter. Yes, this hunt is super soloable, by the way, but yes, with a party full of one single element, you can reduce the damage of every Eschaton Judgment that you face on the hunt.
You're lying.
No, seriously, I mean it. Alatreon does Eschaton Judgment at the end of every second mode switch, and the order of his modes without interruption is, assuming that you have the version of the quest that starts with fire mode, fire, dragon, ice, dragon, fire, dragon, so on and so forth, repeating that pattern, swapping back and forth with dragon in between. Swap the fires and ices around if it's the ice version of the quest. It's all very simple in that aspect. So, for example, he will start the fight in fire mode, progress to dragon mode, then do his big attack, after which he will enter ice mode, progress to dragon mode, then enter another big attack. That's the pattern. When you break one of Alatreon's horns, however, it breaks this pattern and causes Alatreon's next elemental mode to instead be his previous one. Or I guess more accurately, it resets the pattern to how it was at the beginning of the quest. It resets him to his initial beginning pattern, which means that you can always consistently reset him to his original element. You can see how this would be completely ridiculously useful, right? So right here is your main underlying strategy for any Alatreon hunt that you do, solo or multiplayer. Listen up. If he starts on fire mode, if it's the fire mode version of the quest, either assignment or that version of the event quest, bring an ice weapon, cause his elemental flinch during the fire mode, then break one horn during the following dragon mode. Survive the big boom, he returns to fire. Use your ice weapons once more to cause another elemental flinch, he switches to dragon mode, break his second horn, you survive another big attack, and bam, back to a third fire mode, which you can again get the elemental flinch on. A dragon mode where you just do damage in general because he's out of horns, and then a third Eschaton Judgment where you can very easily pass the damage check beforehand. For the ice version of the quest, just switch to a fire weapon and it's the same thing. Using this, you can create a situation where you have the preferable element set for 3 straight Eschaton Judgments, meaning you can survive the entire time until the 4th judgment without having anyone die to the big attack, and that is more than enough time to kill him if you are meeting the damage checks anyways.
This is the answer to our problems!
So let out a big sigh of relief. That's it, people. It's that easy. If everyone learns to adapt to doing specifically this, the hardest part of the quest becomes trivial, absolutely simple. This is not an easy monster, but he is a learnable monster with unique mechanics that you really need to understand to have a fair chance at beating him. Not that you can't kill him another way, just that this way of doing it is actually genuinely easy. It removes the difficulty of this attack and this threshold and lets you focus on all the crazy death and destruction surrounding you the rest of the time. Because goddamn, even his general moveset is just insane. He has a number of very basic attacks that I won't go too in depth with, tiny little headbutts and claw swipes, tail swipes, charges forward, and a couple of just regular forward facing straight on elemental beams, but his elemental variety means that he has a ridiculous number of particularly dangerous and unique attacks that all have different ways of dealing with them correctly, and generally the more dangerous the attack is, the more obvious of a telegraph that it has beforehand, which makes it a lot easier to avoid getting hit once you learn some of those animations along the way.
Know your enemy and know yourself, and you will always be victorious.
Going through it elementally then, as that is the easiest way to categorize it, starting with fire, a number of the fire attacks he does cause secondary explosions, creating patches on the ground that glow and then explode a moment later. So keep an eye out for that just in general. As for specific attacks, there is a particularly dangerous one where he fires out 3 lines in a cone in front of him. If you are his target, then a simple dodge to the left or right will get you out of this line. But if it is targeting someone else, make sure to pay attention to where the lines are aimed at. He will, from the ground, do a tiered ring of fire explosion, a lot like Zeno and Safi'jiiva do, where a number of explosions will happen in a growing ring shape around him. He also has an attack in his arsenal that creates a patch of burning fire on the floor, very similar to the molten gold patches that Call of Tarath does, leaving a patch of very hot liquid on the floor by itself, and they act accordingly, giving you ticking damage over time that is quite painful. Then, other than this, the only really worrying attacks are various shapes of beams, including an aerial one where he does a weird spin which has a unique shape you learn to avoid. Every other fire attack that he does is just a simpler variation of one of these things.
It's a dragon!
As for the dragon type abilities, this is where most of the general bops and bobs fall under, all of the general physical attacks, the headbutts, the claw swipes, the charges, all of those. But those pale in comparison to some of the more intense dragon attacks, such as one where he combos out of an attack from another element mid-air, midair into a super speed charge directly at you, which you can dodge with a single roll to the side if you're quick enough. The move where he slams his paws on the floor like an angry child, either 2 or 3 times in a row, this one has a really nice animation for knowing when to dodge. Just dodge perpendicularly away from him to the left or right, and you can avoid it. The main dragon attack that he does that seems to be catching people out, myself included, is this just massive AoE energy blast he does around himself sometimes. It has a massive telegraph beforehand. Just if you see him start to pulse like this, back away out of range for a moment. It does a crazy amount of damage. It's just even remotely worth trying to tank. There is another version of this attack when Alatreon is flying, where he does the telegraph midair, then super speed flies towards a target and explodes around himself when he reaches that destination in the air. In either way, just recognize the telegraph and you can get out of the way of this one fairly consistently.
Ah, the telegraph.
As for the ice abilities of note, Alatreon has a number of attacks where he just straight up shoots icicles at you in either horizontal or vertical arcs, but the most important of note here are the less single target attacks, such as the big ice frontal cone that he does similar to Velkhana, except it creates a patch of damaging ground on the floor that takes your health down over time if you don't get out of it, though 2 rolls to the side is always enough to avoid this when you see it coming. Alatreon has a specific ice attack where he will actually coat the ceiling in ice above him, causing little icicles to drop from the sky periodically, also like Velkhana. This is only really dangerous because he continues doing other attacks while they are falling, so just make sure that you are aware of these when they are falling from the sky. He also has a fairly well telegraphed attack where he flies into the air and does a massive circle of ice below him that damages you over time, with significantly higher damage being dealt near the center of the attack, almost like it gets warmer as it spreads out further from the center like actual ice. How cool. Like the old world, his actual icicles themselves will stick in the ground as little ice spires, though this time around they also have the bonus effect of when they are hit by lightning, they turn red and explode, so again, watch out for these. I love that they put in specific inter-element interactions though. That's a really neat little function that they've added. When it comes to said thunder attacks that light the ice up, there are 3 notable kinds of attacks that Alatreon will do. One is a lot like Kirin, where he swishes his head in a forward motion, it creates a line of lightning. He will do this either 2 or 3 times in a row on a specific player target, either horizontally or vertically. Just wait for the line to show up and dodge accordingly each time. The second kind is a back eject, where he will fling himself backwards away from the fight and then fire out a horizontal line of electricity in front of him that slowly progresses forward and explodes. And then the third is more of a room-wide storm attack, which is always telegraphed by him absorbing a bunch of blue lines out of the air. Then lightning will start striking down around him for the next few seconds. This attack is easily dodged with your weapon out, just walking around, as long as you are actively trying to avoid it instead of trying to hit the monster. And that covers all of his— wait a minute.
Water, please.
That's right, just in time for Iceborne, Alatreon finally realized how to use the final element, by which I mean he finally worked out that ice plus fire equals water. But while Alatreon's water attacks only really consist of shooting out arcs of little water globs, nothing particularly major on that front, the interesting part of his water attacks that you have to watch out for is that they aren't quite water. It's more of a flammable liquid, almost like he's worked out how to use his fire sac to just let out liquid without lighting it, which is super cool as it means that any water puddles he puts on the floor will, when hit with a fire attack, catch on fire and turn into a damaging pool to stand in on the floor. Finally, Eschaton Judgment. Now that you know all the requirements of making a preferable judgment happen in the first place, how do you survive the damage? Well, it quickly ticks over time and leaves red health, similar to Lunastra's Supernova, but significantly higher damage. The easiest way to survive this is, with health boost, wait until you start to receive damage from the attack, and then instantly eat a single Astera Jerky. This will restore you to full health a bit more than halfway through the damage, and leave you at the end of the ability with the majority of your health still left. If you struggle with this, Health Booster and Vitality Mantle are both super viable options to make this easier at the cost of one of your tool slots each.
Here are the tools.
And with all of that said, the rest of the general hunt strategy is relatively simple. You still want to flint shot him whenever he is not enraged, focus on either the head for maximum damage or the front arms if you can't reach the head, and then one final note on that front is blight resistance. I could not possibly recommend this skill more for this fight, as Dragon Blight will literally make you fail the quest if you don't take it off of yourself. And while nullberries do work, you can only carry 10 at a time, without the ability to use a Farcaster in this quest to restock. And that's pretty much everything to do with his fight. Just remember the most important part is to match his starting element. Flinch him before he switches to dragon, break a horn in dragon, and repeat. Alatreon is a challenging fight, no doubt about it, but if you do it this way, you'll have a far easier time than you would otherwise. So I wish you all the best of luck out there. As for my feelings on the fight itself, well, they're mixed, really. I love his attacks. They gave him so many unique and interesting abilities across his elements. He really does feel like the lord of all of the elements. He has what feels like either the greatest or matched for the greatest control that we've seen over a number of the elements, all piled together into the same dragon. He has a bunch of attacks that I love individually. Cool patterns or abilities where the way that you have to dodge it is very rhythmic. It has a flow, and visually speaking, this might be the prettiest fight as a whole that I've ever seen. With the combination of the way that the arena looks in general, and the ridiculously cool attacks of each individual element, each one separately, it's awesome, and his just general attacks are incredibly tense to avoid, just in general, before we even get to Eschaton Judgment. But Eschaton Judgment is where my feelings start to get mixed. I hate damage checks. I'll say it right here and now, there should simply not be a point in a non-special quest with a damage check that you have to pass or you simply won't beat the monster.
You've already done enough damage.
Normal behemoth, no damage check. That was okay. Extreme behemoth, damage check. But okay, because he was the arch-tempered challenge version of the quest. It is simply not possible to survive Eschaton Judgment without beating a damage check. And you can't do that damage check consistently without a strategy that is based around having a load of prior knowledge about the fight. It works, it functions, but this felt a lot more like a challenge quest version, like a tempered Alatreon, than it did like a story monster. An average hunter who doesn't look up guides and such will likely struggle to kill this monster from now until the end of time. There's just too much going on to shove yourself at it endlessly without understanding the fight in at least some light capacity. I get that Alatreon is a black dragon, and a black dragon is supposed to be hard, but he already is hard. His entire moveset, if you take Eschaton Judgment out, is actually genuinely difficult and very cool. The thing is, I love what the mechanic makes you do. I love that it makes you think about which element to bring. It makes you coordinate a part break, and it literally means that you are taking control of which element he is using, which is just so cool. I just wish that there was a way to accomplish all of this without attaching an arbitrary damage number to it, that's all. I love new Alatreon as a creature. I love the majority of his moveset, but Eschaton Judgment has me extremely conflicted, and I know I'd personally prefer if future monsters move away from this kind of mechanic. I'm just saying. Alright everyone, I've been Cotton Dinosaur, and this has been everything that you need to know to defeat Alatreon, the first black dragon to reach the new world. Do you like Alatreon in general? What are your feelings about Eschaton Judgment specifically? Like if you liked the video, subscribe and hit the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet. This is the brand new outro to tell you all the things that you do that we love, so let's start with something simple and say, oh, we love your eyes. When they're watching us play video games, when we make a bunch of jokes that are kinda lame, or when they gaze upon our failures as we try to kill the monsters or important news about the kingdom Animalia. Rage, Cotton, and Hollow are all here, talking about the things you want to hear, so if you want to be the first to hear, like and subscribe and the bell and we'll cheer. Some of you are patrons even though we are all the noobs and you're the pros. There's nothing we can do to thank you. No, really, there's nothing we could possibly do. Goodbye.